Welcome to the Sangamo road trip. Our next stop is Virden, Illinois. Just a few miles south of Thayer, Illinois, is the city of Virden, straddling Sangamon and Macoupin counties, and is home to over 3,000 people. Established in 1852, the town was named for John Virden, who kept a popular stage stand about 2 miles south of where Virden would be built. He reportedly opened the stage stand in about 1838 at the intersection of the Springfield and St. Louis stage line and the Springfield and Vandalia stage line. It was known throughout the area as the Virden Stand. To learn more about the town of Virden, I turned to John Alexander at Books on the Square to tell us a few of the interesting stories about this little town.
Okay, and Virden is a railroad town. It was started basically by a group of people from the Chicago and, well, I still call it the Chicago and Alton Railroad, although back in the original days it was the Sangamon and Alton-Sangamon Railroad. Benjamin Godfrey was the organizer, and he put together a group of people who represented the railroad's best interests and political types along the way. Virgil Hickox from Springfield on the north to the mayor of Alton on the south, and some county officials, one from here in Macoupin County. Basically, Virden represented a halfway point between the county seats in Carlinville on the south and Springfield on the north. The two county seats were separated by about 40 miles, and Virden was 20 miles out there in the middle. So they kind of picked this site for that reason, and also I think the reason that Virden is on some real high ground. We're on a dividing ridge here where water on the north edge of Virden flows north through Springfield Lake and out into the Sangamon River. On the south end of town, water is shed in the direction of Macoupin Creek to the Illinois River. So this is high ground midway between two county seats. And that's basically how it got started. Over the years, Virden grew north toward the Sangamon County line, and in my lifetime, in fact, I had a hand in it in the early 1980s. An attorney friend here in town, he and I developed a subdivision on what is now the north edge of Virden and in Sangamon County. So Virden is one of the many towns in Illinois that straddle two, and I think there are even towns that maybe straddle three county lines. But we very definitely do. Our population is about 3,500 people, and I would guesstimate that about 150 of those 3,500 live in Sangamon, the balance and the bulk live in Macoupin County.
John, could you tell us a little bit about the Lincoln oak tree?
Sure, and a couple from Virden, Balfour and Amanda Cowan, attended the funeral at Oak Ridge Cemetery the day Lincoln was buried in Springfield. And the story in Virden, and there's certainly evidence of the tree to this very day, is that the Cowans picked up an acorn from an oak tree the day Lincoln was buried, brought that acorn back and planted it on the north side of their home, a beautiful little home over here in the southwest section of town. And lo and behold, that tree is still growing today. So it would be, I'm doing some quick math, 155 years old, the oak tree. It's been taken great care of over the years by several different families, including one lady who wrote a little story about the oak tree and her effort to make sure it has survived to this very day. But it's a very historic tree in town, and I think a connection to our past. It's almost been here as long as the town. My wife calls these memory trees, trees that have seen a lot, and if they could only talk. And some people believe trees do talk or communicate with each other. I'm not one of those, but this tree has seen the town grow from Lincoln's time to today.
John, can you tell us a little bit about the Battle of Virden?
I'd be glad to, Ann. Back in 1898, when coal mining was really thriving, not only in the state of Illinois and the nation, but right here in central Illinois, Virden had the largest producing coal mine in the state by the records the state has kept over the years for the year 1897. In 1898, the miners who worked under deplorable conditions, as we all know, went on strike, trying to increase their salary from 32 cents a ton that they brought to the surface, upwards to about 40 cents a ton. And that touched off a real controversial situation here locally, when eventually the district UMWA, the United Mine Workers of America, settled with the coal companies and did get their 40 cents a ton, but the largest mine in the state here in Virden would not go along with the settlement. So what was a strike became a lockout, where the company refused to allow the men to come to work and get their 40 cents a ton that they had earned the hard way, physically and through the strike. What the coal company did here locally was recruit replacement workers from the South, unfortunately African American coal miners from Alabama. That makes the story not only a labor story, but a racial story as well. When the coal company attempted to bring the miners in to Virden in September of 1898, they turned back when they saw there was opposition here. The miners from central Illinois had gathered in Virden and wanted to fight about this. They didn't want the Virden miners to be replaced by coal miners from Alabama or Arkansas or Illinois or Missouri or anywhere else for that matter. The train that carried the replacement workers in became an armed train in St. Louis, where it picked up Pinkerton-type guards, fully armed, former cops, former soldiers who had fought in Cuba in 1898, fresh out of the Army, boarded the train and were going to force a landing, I guess you could say, of the replacement workers. Well, unbeknownst to those cops from St. Louis, about 1,000 armed coal miners had gathered here in Virden knowing that train was going to come through town. And when it came through, the quick story is, about noontime on October 12th, 1898, a gun battle touched off, the likes of which I don't think there's a comparison event in Illinois history unless you would look at the Fort Dearborn massacre. But here in Virden, a little town in central Illinois, 8 miners were killed, 5 guards, in about a 15-minute fight. Well, if you stop and think about that, that's 13 people in about 15 minutes. That's pretty deadly fire. And it was a major story around the country in that the company's attempt to land the miners failed. The train eventually pulled on into Springfield and then up to Lincoln and Atlanta, Illinois, in that area before it really slowed down even, and eventually found its way back to Springfield for the night. But the battle was national news. It was like the front page news in nearly every paper in the country. So I always say if Virden had its 15 minutes of fame, like a lot of small towns get, October 12th, 1898 was our 15 minutes of fame. It's also a very important day in the memory of coal miners and their families locally, because eventually they got their 40 cents a ton. It's a very important day in the history of the United Mine Workers of America. Evidence of that is that after the Virden mine battle for years and years and years, October 12, 1898 was known as Virden Day in the coal industry, and it was a national holiday for coal miners up through about the 1940s and even into the 1950s. And today it's also the date of the annual meeting, you could say, of the Mother Jones Society. They meet about the time of the Virden mine battle. So that was our 15 minutes of fame, and I guess my favorite little Virden story.
John, what can you tell us about Charlie Berger, the notorious gangster?
Was the last man hanged in Illinois, and he's Virden's. Virden is, we're not proud of him, but it's interesting that he lived here. I discovered him in our 1910 census, a little too late to tell Gary Daniil, who wrote a biography of Berger. And on the reprint, on the second edition, Daniil included the story about Virden. But in Virden, a little newspaper research showed that he listed himself as a coal miner, which wasn't surprising. He lived here in the teens, and also on the side ran a little pool hall downtown. Another little note that made the Virden paper was that Charlie won a dance contest here in Virden with a gal named Nettie Sharon, whose grandchildren were good friends of mine and still are. But Berger's pool hall kind of did him in here in Virden. Apparently Charlie had quite a temper, and one night became upset and angry with one of his patrons in the pool hall and beat the guy with a pool cue. And that pretty much was the end of Charlie and Virden. I think the people in town kind of turned on him. And from here he headed south. Here in Virden he was a nobody, but 10 or 15 years later he was a legend. He was the Al Capone of southern Illinois, really. He became famous for his feud with his former members of the gang, the Sheltons. And nearly everybody from here south in Illinois knows the name of Charlie Berger and the Sheltons. But at one time he was a resident of this community for a few years and is probably our more infamous former citizen.
John, what can you tell me about the WPA mural? Could you tell us a little bit about the WPA mural in your post office?
Okay, Virden hosts a great mural by a great artist, a gentleman named James Dougherty. I'm spelling that D-A-U-G-H-E-R-T-Y. Was one of the so-called starving artists of the Great Depression. To put these artists back to work, the federal government came up with a plan to have them produce murals that would be displayed in public buildings around the country. Well, Dougherty apparently had pretty good work, but he did take the feds up on one mural that he produced for the Virden, Illinois post office. It's still in there today, and quite a piece of artwork. Dougherty knew about the Virden mine battle and wanted to produce a mural to commemorate the mine battle, but the postmaster in Virden at the time wouldn't sign off on that mural. He thought it was still maybe too controversial in Virden history to be depicted on the wall in the post office. So Doherty did a mural called Illinois Pastoral, which a lot of people think included figures, including maybe Abraham Lincoln, that he had used in some of his books and would use in future books he produced. He was a real top-notch illustrator, and also did an important book, children's book, on Lincoln that he wrote and illustrated. I've got a few copies if you'd like to see some examples of his work. But he was a high-powered artist who left our wall a real conversation piece. You can walk into the lobby and take a look at this beautiful mural he's done.
To learn more about the town of Virden, Illinois, seek out Books on the Square, which is on the square in Virden, or look to Sangamon County Historical Society's Sangamo link. Tune in next time when we travel to a different town here in Sangamon County, Illinois.